Hey guys, Merry Christmas, and I'm here today to talk about Jack Frost from 1998, starring Michael Keaton, Kelly Preston, Joseph Cross, amongst others. If I had to rank this in a holiday favorites category, I would put this in an honorable mention list. This movie doesn't really stand out in comparison to some others that people talk about, especially the ones that I've discussed on here. This is a very family-friendly and reasonably entertaining type of movie for children and any age to enjoy. And especially with its subject matter regarding the death of a loved one in the hereafter and having some unfinished business before you go on to the afterlife, this movie doesn't really delve deep into those areas that you would expect it to, like say The Sixth Sense, for instance. And to be honest, I think it's rather a harmless movie. Critics were not too thrilled about this. The audiences, though, seem to really like it. And as far as one of my good friends, this is her favorite Christmas movie, if not one of her favorites. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of this movie on Blu-ray, hence why I have the Charlie Brown and Polar Express copies right here. Those are my personal favorite things to watch on Christmas every year. If I had to guess the last time I watched it, it was probably almost 25 years ago when I saw this. I didn't get to see it in theaters. We had a VHS tape somewhere. I don't know exactly what happened to it, but this movie was actually my introduction to Michael Keaton. In the movie, he plays a musician named Jack Frost. I know, very on the nose type of name for this setting. Has a wife and a son, and he's an aspiring musician who's really good at what he does, which unfortunately leads to him missing out on certain moments with his son, missing one of his hockey games, and then finally getting an opportunity to make it up to him by taking the family to a family cabin somewhere in the mountains, and then getting a career opportunity that could really propel him as a musician. So after a last-second decision deciding not to go through with the offer, he's unfortunately killed in an auto accident while driving into a bad snowstorm. Then the film jumps to 1 year later where his son Charlie is still reeling from his father's death. Later that night, when he plays a harmonica that his dad gave to him the night before he died, Jack comes back in the form of a snowman that Charlie built out in the front yard and gets a chance to reconnect with his son and make up for lost time. As I said earlier, this was my introduction to Michael Keaton. I never saw Beetlejuice. I had heard of it. I didn't know that he was Batman until I was much older when I saw the Dark Knight trilogy with Christian Bale. But Michael Keaton in this movie is actually really funny. I think it's the usual stuff that we expect from Michael Keaton with his comedic timing and his very down-to-earth type of personality. Now, what I really like that this movie does is that they portray him as a loving father, and he does actually love his son and his wife. But he's unfortunately torn in between trying to be a good family man and being a musician. He actually wants to try to make the time for his family, but always finds himself getting drawn away from it. But the way he talks to his son throughout this movie is, in a way, I think, kind of how a fun dad would be. Butt Dad? You just call me Butt Dad? Is that what you say to all the kids in your class? Butt Dad? By the way, figured I'd call you Butt Boy. But when he comes back from the hereafter into the form of a snowman, he tries to reconnect with Charlie, and Charlie is freaked out by a live talking snowman. Then as he's trying to figure out what's going on, he ends up getting run into by a snowplow and shoved right into a big wall of snow. And this is probably one of, if not my favorite parts in this movie, is when he's trying to piece himself back together after the middle part falls out, which unfortunately I'm not able to show you, but if you've seen the movie, you know what it is. And if you don't know, give it a watch. It's Michael Keaton throughout this whole movie, especially in this scene, is just hilarious. Hey you! Ball number 2! Don't just sit there, give me a hand! Nice work, ball number 3. I think he's probably the glue that holds this movie together. Everybody else plays their part just fine. I mean, except for, well, no, I think the bully, Rory Buck, played by Taylor Hanley, is kind of obnoxious, and I guess if you have to go into the negatives, there's some stuff in this movie that really dates it. Taylor Hanley's character, Rory Buck, is a very cliche 90s school bully. His attitude and his hair, and how he just wants to really pound Charlie into the dirt, which I really like how they get it all out of the way with him standing up to the school bully in the opening of the movie, and not have to gradually build up the confidence towards the finale. And while there's not a whole lot of time with Rory, we do hear at one point in the movie that he actually never met his father, hence why more than likely he is a school bully. And when he finds Charlie and sees that his dad is actually a snowman when it's getting really warm outside on Christmas Eve, he has somewhat of an arc and actually becomes friends with Charlie and decides to help him save his dad. It's pretty quick in how they resolve it, but either way, I think it's a nice moment. But it shows the commonality that the two have. They both know what it's like to not have a dad in their lives. And I think Joseph Cross in this movie is actually quite good. I find him to be a very sympathetic and likable person, especially when he builds a snowman in the front yard right before his dad shows up, with the song Landslide playing in the background. This movie was also my introduction to Stevie Nicks and Fleetwood Mac. I actually had a chance to see Stevie Nicks in concert over a month ago, and she closed out the show with this song.
Climbed the mountain and I turned around, and I saw my reflection in the snow-covered hills, till the landslide brought me down.
Long story short, I knew of their music because of this movie, and I did a little bit of research after that as I went on through life. But then in 2020, when the world shut down and I had nothing better to do, I decided to, for some reason, devote my time to listen to Fleetwood Mac. And because of certain things I experienced after that in the last couple of years, this song really resonates with me on a deep level. And it's a very emotional scene when we see him build the snowman and the song's playing in the background. And if you're someone who's experienced loss of some kind in your life, it's hard not to feel some kind of an emotion while watching this. Even with all the faults that you can find with this movie, this, I think, surprisingly has a huge amount of heart and emotional weight behind it. And watching this last night, when Stevie's voice started to come out, I lost it. Not one word of a lie. Tears literally poured out of my eyes. But to go into the undercurrent of emotion with this movie, Jack is finally able to make up for his son what he wasn't able to do when he was alive. Teaching him how to shoot the hockey puck a certain way, as he calls it, the J shot, which he finally gets to see him score his first goal towards the finale, even though it's really hot outside and he risks turning into a puddle of water. He knew that it was worth seeing his son score a goal at least once while he was there. And he's able to help Charlie realize that he needs to get on with his life and not stay on the tarmac of his past. Even though he has a right to grieve his loss, he does have responsibilities that he needs to take care of. His school, his mom, and his friends, which one of them, believe it or not, is actually played by young Andy Lawrence. As I was watching the movie, I realized, oh my god, that's Andy Lawrence! Whoa! But him telling Charlie to try to get on with his life and take care of his responsibilities further plays into the notion when his mother, played by Kelly Preston, sees him talking to the snowman, and she becomes very concerned about what Charlie's going through, asking Jack's bandmate to try to see where his mindset is at. We also get to see how Jack's death affected him as well, and that he didn't really want to go into the music business again because it felt more like a job rather than just some form of life. And then by the end of the movie, he ends up trying to go back into music again, even though I wish that we had at least one moment where he realizes that Jack was there, because when Jack calls his wife at the house, Mac is right there when Jack's wife is listening and she recognizes his voice on the phone. We don't really see what Mac's reaction is. I was kind of hoping that they would at least show some response, something, anything, where he goes, wait, what do you mean Jack was on the phone? It's a huge nitpick, but I would have liked at least some clarification there. To veer back into the fun aspects for a minute, the snowboard chase is really fun, but the best part of that sequence is the way Jack throws the snowballs at the school bullies by causing his arms to go into a circular motion, throwing this onslaught of snowballs at the bullies.
Snowman? No, much, much more. I am the Wizard of Blizzard!
And as far as the effects on the snowman itself, I think it actually looks pretty good, especially considering that this came out in 1998. Save for a couple of images where it's pretty obvious that, yeah, that doesn't look that good. That's bound to happen as time goes on anyway. But inevitably, when they get up to the cabin in the mountains where they originally were going to stay for their vacation, Jack is finally able to find some closure in being the father that he never got to be. Says a really heartfelt goodbye to Charlie, promising that he'll always be there for him whenever he needs him. And then his wife shows up, and the goodbye that they share.
Every time we say goodbye, I cry a little.
If I wasn't a mess already with the landslide scene, this one probably got me just as much. As I said earlier, this movie isn't really that deep with its subject matter, even though it does touch on certain emotions the characters are feeling. You could argue that it definitely could have gone a whole lot deeper than it does, because I think it only really goes skin deep for the most part, and not so really deep into it. Even then, I don't really see it as a negative. I don't want to sound like I'm settling for mediocrity or anything, because I don't think this movie is mediocre at all. But there's not a whole lot of stuff in here that makes it stand out, save for a couple moments that I personally can still remember. I don't know about anybody else, which I guess for most people probably not, because nobody really talks about this movie all these years later, and I think maybe you should give it a fair shot again if you haven't. For the kind of movie that it's trying to be, I think it very well gets the job done. What really elevates this movie is Michael Keaton and the certain moments that I mentioned with Landslide and his goodbye to his wife and son. And if you're someone who's experienced loss of some kind, this movie might touch you on a personal level, as I know it did for me. And it's certainly much better than what the critics gave it credit for at the time. If anything, just watch it for Michael Keaton alone. Those are my thoughts on Jack Frost. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on this movie if you've seen it. Hope you guys are having a great Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, or whatever you guys celebrate. And as always, see you in the next one.